My name is Corey, and I've spent a lot, and I mean a lot, of time as a clerk, constantly working at different establishments throughout the years. Because of the global pandemic, I had recently gotten laid off of my job and was forced to seek new openings. I eventually decided to go with a janitor position as cleaning was relatively calming for me. I know, unpopular opinion, but cleaning was basically my me time. Long story short, I got hired in 2 weeks and began my first shift at a local convention center. With it being my first shift, I had the amazing luck of working the night shift with no other janitors in the building. I start by cleaning the bathrooms on the first floor and thought I'd make my way up to the second after I was done. Now, this convention center is huge, about the size of a football stadium, so I knew this would take hours. Needless to say, I clean the first floor and make my way up to the second. As I'm walking down the hall, I then see someone walk into the auditorium. Keep in mind that I was the only janitor on duty and the building was closed, so there was no reason as to why someone should be in here. I called down the hall, yelling at the person that they couldn't be up here, but got no response. I went to the door that led into the auditorium and proceeded to knock, telling them to come out. The lights were on inside, but I couldn't see who or where they were. The very second I opened the door, I start looking around for places where somebody could hide, but ended up finding no one. Figuring it was just all in my head, I walk out of the auditorium and go back to mopping when I hear a knock at the door. I turn around and open the doors to the auditorium once again, only to find absolutely nobody. This room was empty, and the only things inside were a few stacked chairs. I go back out into the hall, and not even 5 seconds later, I hear the knocking again and open the doors to find no one. I felt my blood run cold as I realized that I wasn't hearing things. I then put down my mop while leaving my Rubbermaid in the hallway and walked out of the building. The next day, I called my boss and told him I quit. No more late night shifts for me. That night, when I walked out of the building, I thought about the whole encounter. I say thought because I know what happened. I'm just beyond words to explain it. I used to work as a full-time janitor in the convention area of the Swan and Dolphin Resort/Hotel. Sometimes I'd have to get there at very late hours in the night and work until sunrise. Most of the time, I'd work alone, but at the time we had a newcomer who worked the first floor. Being alone on the second floor, I'd mostly mop the floors while listening to my music on full blast. One night, I had been cleaning one of the restrooms when I find a notebook on the floor. It looked seemingly new, and me being Snoopy, I decided to open it. The majority of pages were blank, but there was one page with writing on it. Figuring it was probably a journal or something, I read it, and what I read sent shivers down my spine. It seemed to be a girl, judging by the handwriting, and after reading, I came to the conclusion that this person needed help. It was a full page as to how they had been kidnapped and couldn't say anything, but had managed to find this journal to tell what had happened. The person claimed that they were 7 and hadn't seen or heard from their family in months. Even the way they wrote seemed like they were in distress. That was the nail in the coffin, and at that point, I called the police while radioing the other janitor. Long story short, the police confiscated the notebook and told us that we had to leave for investigation purposes. I didn't go back to work for a whole week and never had any updates on the incident. So, I've been working as a janitor at the local high school for a few years now, and it's one of the most easiest jobs I've been on. It wasn't a big school, as the town it was in was relatively small, so I was the only janitor working the night shifts. Most of my duties would be to go from building to building, mopping floors and picking up trash. It was a chill job, but it could get a bit lonely from time to time. One night, I was called into work a bit later than usual as the other janitor stayed to make up extra hours he had requested. I took his spot once he had left, and pretty soon I was the only one in the building. It was a Monday night if I remember correctly, and I was doing my usual nightly routine of mopping the hallways when I hear the sound of a door slamming closed. My initial thought was that the door stopper I had placed to keep it open had somehow gotten moved, and I go over to see what it was. I could vaguely remember closing every door on this floor, so I was surprised that I had forgotten to close one. I go to the classroom where I heard the noise and peek my head inside, expecting to find the stopper on the floor. Sure enough, the door stopper was on the floor, and that's when I noticed something else by one of the metal cabinets. It only took me a good second to realize that there was a finger wrapped around it. Because of the angle, I didn't see who was hiding behind there, and I sure as hell didn't want to know. I locked the door and didn't spend another second in there and practically ran outside the building calling security. When they showed up, I led them to the room where I saw the person hiding. However, by the time we got there, there was nobody inside and the window was left wide open. The whole ordeal didn't make any sense as we were on the third floor, which was about 40 feet from the ground, so there was no way he would have survived a fall like that. The security guard gave me an annoyed type of look as if he didn't believe me. I explained what I saw to my girlfriend, but instead of believing me, she went on to lecture me about how I wasn't getting enough sleep. Looking back now, I don't blame her, but I know what I saw. A few days later, one of the janitors was working the night shift as I had called in sick that day. He was mopping the floors of the second building when he found a dirty homeless man inside one of the storage closets. The man attacked him with a large butcher knife, causing a truckload of blood to spill. Thankfully, there was an officer on standby and must have heard the commotion from upstairs. Long story short, the cop tases the man and was obviously arrested. Thankfully, the other janitor had survived but had to have several stitches done. I still don't know as to how the man had managed to get into school without being caught. School security was pretty strict about letting outsiders in unless it was a parent or something. I worked that job for another month after and never saw anything abnormal again.